All right, geometry. Here we go with our work to begin with on Standard 6, properties of angles formed by transversals. Okay, here's our scale. So I've already got mine filled out, so if you need to pause it so you can get yours filled out, go ahead and do that. You are at the beginning level, level 1, if you can classify angles formed by transversals in diagrams, and you can solve problems given one set of parallel lines and numeric values for angles. Okay, you are at the approaching level, level 2, if you can also solve problems requiring basic algebra given one set of parallel lines. Okay, so level 3, you are considered proficient if you can do the first two, and you can also solve problems requiring basic algebra given more than one transversal and or more than one set of parallel lines. And you can also justify each solution method with the appropriate postulate or theorem. And then for that level 4, the exemplary level, you must be able to be successful in the first 3 and also solve problems requiring the combination of parallel line properties and other previously learned topics such as vertical angles, linear pairs, the triangle sum theorem, and exterior angle theorem. All right, so today we have in class 25 is our lesson here. Okay, so to start with, the line in bold here that's cutting through is called the transversal. Okay, it's called the transversal. So let's get some definitions here. We have what are called corresponding angles. Okay, I'm going to write this in here, and I'm also going to color in what corresponding angles are. Okay, so for example, here we have corresponding angles would be here and here. So these two angles would be corresponding angles. Okay, then we have consecutive interior angles. So consecutive interior angles. Interior, think of inside. Consecutive means one right after the other, right? So for example, here would be consecutive interior angles. Okay. Then let's go up here. We have what are called alternate. That's an R and an N. Interior angles. Okay, interior again, think of inside. Alternate. Interior would be those two, kind of opposite each other. Okay, and lastly down here, we have alternate exterior. Exterior meaning outside. Think of it as outside, okay, for exterior. So that would be, for example, here and here would be alternate exterior. Okay, so in this diagram using numbers 1 through 8, let's list all the corresponding angles because we have more than one, right? So let's go with the same color here. So corresponding angles here would include angles 1 and 3. 1 and 3, right? It's like they're in the same position, kind of. So angles 6 and 8. Angle 2 and 4. And lastly, angle 5 and angle 7. Okay, and then we've got, next it asks for the alternate interior angles. So that would be angle 6 and angle 4. Inside we have 6 and 4, and we also have angle 3 and angle 5. Okay, Then we have next it asks for consecutive interior. So again, consecutive is basically next to each other. So consecutive interior here would be angles 3 and 6. Okay, and also angles 4 and 5. And lastly, we have the alternate exterior angles. Okay, so here that would be angles 1 and 7. Right, 1 and 7, and then angles 2 and 8. Okay, and I missed these little notes underneath these two. Sorry about that. Consecutive interior angles. Think of angles on the same side as the transversal, right? The transversal is the line that cuts through the parallel lines there. And then for the alternate exterior, think about angles on opposite, or if you want to think about alternate. Run out of space there. Alternate, opposite sides of the transversal, or alternate is that other word, but I like opposite, but you can use whichever. Okay, so a transversal cutting through a set of lines. So let's look at this here. Let me zoom a little bit. For each angle pair, identify the transversal and state the angle type. So using angles, or looking at angle 14 and 16. Okay, using angle 14 and 16, which is the transversal. It would be this one cutting through these two lines. So L would be the transversal. And what are 14 and 16? Out of the 4 choices, they are corresponding angles. Okay. If we look at angle 12 and 7, 7's here, 12's here. So looking at those, what is the transversal? Would be line M, right? Using 12 and 7. And those would be alternate interior angles. Okay. Looking at 2 and 7, what would be the transversal line there? It would be K. And if K is the transversal, then what are those called? They're called alternate interior angles. Okay, looking at 1 and 8, K would be the transversal again, and 1 and 8 would be alternate exterior angles. Okay, and then the last one, angles 12 and 8, here's 8 and 12. So what would be your transversal? It would be M. And those are consecutive interior angles. So just a little practice with identifying what's the transversal and then what those two angles are to each other. And put a little bit more wording here to it. Okay. So angle relationships with parallel lines are cut by a transversal. Okay, so when this happens, corresponding angles are congruent when lines are parallel. Okay, so if points A, B, and C are translated, okay, the line that passes through B prime and C prime is parallel to line BC. Okay, so it's going to be parallel. So look, straight edge. since the translation is a rigid motion, remember that from earlier, the angle measures are preserved. So this would be like if we had a parallel line here. If B prime and C prime are translated, we would then have parallel lines. Okay. This means that the corresponding angles of angle ABC, so here, and B prime C are congruent. So basically telling us that corresponding angles are congruent. Okay, next we have alternate interior angles are congruent when lines are parallel. Okay, so here's our proof. Okay, to start with, we could say K is parallel to M. And that is given to us, right? Our little arrows here show that that's given. We should have maybe put little arrows on our lines here to show that they're parallel up above. Okay. Next thing we can say is angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because corresponding angles. We can also say angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 because of our vertical angles theorem. Okay, and therefore we can say angle 2 is congruent to angle 3 by the transitive property. Transitive property, remember here, is saying since angle 1 equals angle 2 and angle 1 equals angle 3, we can say angle 2 equals angle 3. Right, so it's kind of like substituting in for angle 1. Okay. Consecutive interior angles are supplementary. Remember, supplementary means 180 degrees, okay, when lines are parallel. Okay, so we can say angle 1 and angle 2 are corresponding angles. Which means they are congruent. Okay, angles 2 and angle 3 form a linear pair, which means they add up to 180 degrees. And what is true about angles 1 and 3, if we combine these facts, the angle 1 and angle 3 must add up to 180 degrees as well. Okay, so a little bit of a proof behind the congruencies here. Okay, if we turn the page, we're going to keep going. We've got one more here before we do some examples. Excuse me. Okay, and that is the alternate exterior angles, and they are congruent. So everything's congruent except for our last one. Okay, when lines are parallel. So our proof is to start with line K being parallel to line M. and that's given, right? It's given in the, well, it should have our little arrows to show that they're parallel. Okay, next we know angle 1 and 2 are corresponding. I wrote that wrong. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 because they're corresponding angles. Sorry, I wrote that wrong to start with. Okay, we also know angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 by vertical angles. Therefore, what can we say if we know that? Is that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, and that is the transitive property. And again, the transitive property, remember, is here saying if angle 1 equals angle 2 and 1 equals 3, then therefore 2 must equal 3. Again, it's like if you made a substitution for angle 1 up here, it'd be angle 2 and 3 are equal. Okay, so reminder here, that means angle 2 and 3 are alternate exterior angles. 2 and 3 are alternate exterior angles. So now we know when lines are parallel that these types of angles are congruent. Right, so alternate exterior angles are congruent. Okay, so let's do a little bit of work here. Some examples. So the measure of angle 7 is 100, and these are going to change all the time, otherwise I'd put 100 on here. Okay, so if 7 is 100, angle 3, what kind of angle is it? Corresponding. Okay, and what do we know about corresponding angles? Is that they're congruent, so that angle 3 is also 100 degrees. Okay, angle 1 is given as 120 degrees, and it's asking what angle 7 is. And I'd first identify what are they. They're alternate exterior angles. And what do we know about alternate exterior angles is that they are congruent, so that means that is 120 degrees. Okay, measure of angle 3 is 140. It's asking for measure of angle 5, and what are they to each other? Alternate interior angles. Okay, and again, what are alternate interior angles? They are congruent. Okay, and lastly, measure of angle 3 is given as 125. It's asking for measure of angle 6. Okay, and these are consecutive interior angles. And this is the one that's different. It's not congruent, but remember, consecutive interior angles equal 180 degrees. So if the measure of angle 3 is 125, gives us 55 degrees. Okay. And just 4 more problems, I think, before you are off to do homework. Yep, the next one in our notes is in class 26. So 1 more and you're off to do homework for in class 25. So if you think you're ready to go, it's a good spot to pause it and see if you can get these. And then hit play so you can check it before you go work on your homework. Okay, so measure of angle 7 is 95. It's asking for the measure of angle 12. Okay, and what kind of angles they are. So again, I would first identify that they are alternate interior angles. Because if we know they're alternate interior, we know that means they're congruent. So my answer there is the same. Okay, next one gives us measure of angle 1 is 125, and it asks us for the measure of angle 9. Okay, and what kind of angles are these to each other but corresponding? Okay, and corresponding angles are congruent, which means my answer here is the same as what was given. Okay, next one, measure of angle 9 is given as 140, and it asked me for the measure of angle 5. These aren't alternate anything, right? These are consecutive angles. Remember, consecutive angles is the one that is adding to 180, and I was given 140. So 180 minus the 140 degrees is 40 degrees. Okay, and the last one for in class 25 gives us the measure of angle 3 is 91 degrees. It asks for the measure of angle 13, making these alternate exterior angles. Okay, and 3 and 13, if they're alternate exterior angles, they're congruent, making the measure of angle 13 also 91 degrees. Okay, so that completes our in class 25 lesson. So you should now be able to go ahead and complete homework